MIRA Business FM, Dubai's home of business radio.
It's the morning drive, it's MIRA Business FM, and it's property and Saudi Arabia next. The tourism sector, more specifically, generated more than 82 billion riyals in visitor spending. That's the first 3 months of 2026. International tourists continue to account for the biggest share of spending. Let's look at this. It's a new report. Kevin Duffield is Regional Director of Built Asset Consulting at Cavendish Maxwell, here to talk about hospitality trends, hotel development plans, what's next for the Kingdom's tourism ambitions. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you for the invite and thanks for having me on the show.
You're very welcome. So Saudi Arabia recorded 82.7 billion riyals, to be exact, in tourism spending in Q1. So what were the big drivers behind the growth, Kevin?
So you've got two key drivers. The first one is obviously domestic tourism.
Right.
That's driven by a couple of things. So firstly, political instability. I don't want to say war or conflict, so we'll say political instability. More people are looking at domestic tourism rather than travelling further afield. That's the first thing. And then secondly, you've got the foundation of religious tourism. You know, you've got seasonal demand. You've got Ramadan, you've got Eid, you've basically got Hajj. They've all, obviously with the changing of the calendar, the Islamic calendar, they've all fallen into Q1. So that has contributed towards that massive spend. And the thing is that we're going to have to look at Q2 and Q3 to see if that trend's actually going to continue. So in terms of, you know, it's all very, very positive in Q1, but we need to see if that trend is going to continue throughout the year.
In terms of international travellers from outside, when you look at that figure, how much of it is part of this kind of calculated marketing push in the Kingdom, or is there a shift in how the region maybe attracts international travellers, global travellers?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, international travellers made up a fifth in terms of the total travellers within this period, but they contributed to 60% of the total spend. They have higher spending capacity, higher spending threshold. They want more luxurious experiences, whether it's in terms of accommodation, whether in terms of F&B or leisure and entertainment. Yeah. So that kind of offsets that low volume. But also you need to look at is where are these metrics coming from? So international travellers that are actually coming through the gateways into the country, or is it international travellers such as Western expats that have decided to stay rather than travel, given obviously the instability in the region? Yeah. So there's a bit more drilling down into them numbers before you can come with a completely accurate figure, but primarily it's due to the higher volume of spend.
Okay, so international visitor numbers fell for obvious reasons, I guess, but spending is still strong. What else do you think? What's your opinion of what's behind that trend?
I think it's curiosity. I would agree with that. If I'm being completely honest, I mean, I grew up in Saudi in the late 70s, early 80s, and I can tell you there was certainly nothing compared to what they have now. And if you look at what is attractive in Saudi, you know, you've got the AlUlas of the world, you've got the Red Sea developments, you know, you've got hundreds of miles of beautiful coastline. You've then got either side of that, you've got the Abba region, and you've got the Neom and Jeddah, you know, you've got the mountainous regions. But then you've got what I would call the entertainment tourism. You know, you've got Six Flags at Qiddiya, you've got Aqua Arabia. All these things have only really come about in the last 3 or 4 years, where they've been envisioned, and now they're actually starting to generate money. And the other thing as well is golf, believe it or not. You know, the huge push with Golf Saudi, obviously you've got the Live, and, you know, Saudi has some amazing golf courses, and there's a huge plan to bring more online. And ironically, it is seeing a lot more golf tourism. It's actually cheaper to fly to Saudi for 2 days and play golf and stay in a hotel than it is to play one round in Dubai in the winter, believe it or not.
I can see that working for those people that wear that glove on the right hand, I suppose. So what is this? There's been a surge in spending, it's probably fair to say. What does it mean for hotel operators on the ground? Is it a struggle to keep pace, or is the infrastructure maturing in line with demand?
I think to answer the first part of the question, occupancies are generally down across the country, but the ADR's increased. Conversely. And again, it comes down to choice, that there is more choice. There's choice in terms of where people can stay. and there's a choice in terms of the quality of accommodation that people can actually stay in. What you would class as a 3-star hotel anywhere else wasn't necessarily a 3-star hotel in Saudi, yet they have upped their game significantly. So you're getting that, and then what you're also getting is people that were maybe travelling for business are now extending that stay and looking at more of a leisure opportunity. They want to go to the AlUlas, they want to go to the concerts, you've got all the big events in Riyadh, and it makes sense that while you're there, you've got this sense of curiosity and let's go and explore Saudi and see what it has to offer.
So the data shows that a number of international tourists fell. They're still the primary kind of engine, spending-wise. Beyond like the high-end luxury sector, what does the data tell us about the type of tourist? Who's currently visiting the kingdom? Is it quite a diverse traveller profile? Is it heavily concentrated in the hubs in Riyadh, in Jeddah? What can you tell from the report?
It's become more diversified over the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years in terms of who's travelling, who's coming into Saudi. The foundation is still obviously religious tourism, and it always will be.
Right.
You can look at the seasonal cycle of Hajj, and you look at Ramadan, you can look at Eid, and then you've got Umrah, which is obviously selective of when you go.
Yeah.
So that continues throughout the year. It's repetitive as well. People don't just do it once. Going back to Six Flags, you might go to Six Flags once or twice, but in terms of visiting, your Meccas and Medinas, it's continuous. People will come in year on year. So you've kind of got that element of it. And then you've got, obviously, events. Riyadh is huge for all its events. You've got the Big Five going on at the moment. You've got the Future Hotels Summit. People are getting ready for Expo 2030, and then obviously ultimately FIFA 2034, I think it is.
Yeah. I mean, I want to ask you about that, actually. I want to come to that in a little while. So I mean, Mecca and Medina outperform the other destinations. I can see that in the report. Religious tourism clearly still driving demand in those two particular cities. That's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're seeing also more of as well is medical tourism. It's interesting enough. It's not actually mentioned in the report. We didn't cover it, but Saudi has some amazing medical facilities,
right,
and some amazing medical practitioners. So we are seeing a lot more people that are kind of going over there for other major surgeries, cosmetic surgeries, etc., etc. And that obviously plays into the kingdom's push to move away from dependency on hydrocarbons, and tourism in whatever form and whatever capacity is one of their major drivers, which ties into obviously Vision 2030.
How significant is that at the moment for the tourism sector? You could put that into some context for us, the medical tourism aspects.
I couldn't quantify it, to be quite honest.
It's again, something you can feel is really happening.
It's something that has been happening. I mean, if you look at, just by looking at the adverts, on the billboards, there's a lot more for cosmetic surgery as you drive through the centre of Riyadh. You drive down King Fahd Road or whatever.
That's a pretty good benchmark.
Well, yeah, because it's not cheap to advertise.
No, absolutely right.
So, there's obviously got to be some outturn from that.
Yeah.
And again, just word of mouth that people have gone to Saudi. I mean, I spent 5 years living in Riyadh prior to moving back to the UAE in 2024.
Right.
And the medical facilities are fantastic. There's no doctor's surgeries per se. Everything is hospital or clinic driven, similar to Dubai, but usually on a bigger scale.
Okay. In terms of the significance of religious tourism, could you quantify that? Because, I mean, that's long been the reason why Saudi has led in tourism number terms.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I mean, look, religious tourism is a catalyst for all the tourism in Saudi at the end of the day. 10 years ago, you wouldn't have considered going to Saudi Arabia for a long weekend or a holiday. But the good thing about the religious tourism, because of the volume is increasing year on year and the demand's increasing year on year, it's almost like a litmus test for the hospitality market. You can look at how 2, 3, 4, 5-star luxury options actually perform in that market. And although it's not going to give you a holistic picture of the whole of KSA, as an investor, it would certainly give you a guidance in terms of what you should be spending your money on and where you should be spending your money.
You said at the start of when we started talking, domestic tourism has been, the driver of late. So that's a growing sector, I guess a rapidly growing sector in very recent terms. Is that helping offset, softer international demand? To what extent is it helping offset?
I wouldn't say it's offsetting it fully, but as you said, it's certainly softening, but that's due to volume.
Yep.
You've got a lower spend per head on domestic tourism because, most of that's made up with KSA nationals. But it's the volume. It's just the huge volume that's actually, again, curiosity wanting to explore what Saudi Arabia's got to offer. Usually people that live in Jeddah stay in Jeddah unless they're going to go across to Medina or Mecca,
right.
Same as in Riyadh. But I have a lot of Saudi national friends, and when you talk to them, they're more interested in seeing what Saudi's got to offer them personally rather than travelling overseas. And obviously it's more cost effective as well. And there is a big push in Kingdom to get people to actually spend their earnings in country.
Yeah. Experience what's happening in the country as well, I suppose. Hotel room rates rising across much of the country, from what I can gather. What does that tell you about tell us about the market?
It tells us that the market's strong at the end of the day. People are flexing their choice. So, as I said earlier on, there was very limited options available. These options have increased, and people want more of a luxury experience. They're prepared to spend more on a stay, spend more on a meal, spend more on leisure and travel. So that's what's primarily driving that. It's just having that broader spectrum of choice.
And it's the choice that's going to keep improving as well, isn't it? If you look at the number of hotel rooms by 2030, not even 4 years away, 105,000 hotel rooms, that's the figure?
Yeah, 105,000 keys is what they're aiming at. And, that is a huge amount of opportunity.
Level of expansion, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's not just... As an investor, it's not just the hotel opportunity. Obviously, you've got the operators that want to go in and people that specialise in hotel investment. It's all the infrastructure that sits around it. Ras Al Khaimah is going through a similar problem now in terms of transport, in terms of roads, in terms of utilities, in terms of where do you house the staff?
Yeah.
And if you look at a 5-star hotel, I think it's 3 to 5 staff per guest. Where are they going to be housed? And again, accommodation. I wouldn't call it labour accommodation, blue-collar accommodation offers a significant investment opportunity if you are looking for something outside of that hospitality sector. Again, can the F&B and retail keep up with the growth? Because it's great throwing all these hotels up and getting people in, but if there's nothing there to service it, so it's got to keep pace with each other. So this growth has to be maintained, obviously, to meet the 2030 vision, but it's got to be carefully nuanced and carefully monitored to make sure that everything actually grows in scale.
What I was going to say to you, is the sector ready for that level of expansion? It's kind of a flippant question because it will be ready, because it will have to be ready, but it's almost doubling, isn't it, effectively? Yeah,
and it comes back to my previous answer. I think the sector is ready for it. There is a demand for it. We've talked about Expo, we've talked about the World Cup in 2034. The events in Riyadh keep getting bigger and better. The sporting events, obviously you've got the Live Golf, they're now getting involved in LTA, Lawn Tennis Association, you've got the football. So I think it's going to be a long time before we reach saturation point in terms of the hospitality requirements. It's just making sure that infrastructure grows up around it to stabilise the growth of that sector.
Yeah, it's easy to follow the logic, isn't it? Which cities offer the biggest growth opportunities for the hotel operators, I suppose, but also for the investors?
You've got to look at it on a case by case. So Riyadh, obviously, you've got a lot of events in there. You've got a lot of corporate. You've got a lot of business, and to a certain degree, leisure and entertainment. Popping down to Six Flags and Aqua Arabia, it's about 40 minutes outside of Riyadh. So for that particular demographic, then you're looking at Riyadh. Jeddah is more cultural, family orientated with business, and obviously it's a gateway into the Western Province. It's a gateway into Medina and Mecca for the religious tourism. And then you can't really offset Dammam. Dammam's a bit of an outlier.
I was going to ask you about Dammam because it's attracting a lot more attention. It seems.
Well, we recently did a piece on the growth of the residential section in Dammam, which has been quite significant. And what we're seeing is the hospitality is starting to keep pace. Again, it's seen as a commercial centre of the Eastern Province. It's a gateway into KSA. You've got the catchment area of Khobar. You've got Dhahran. You've obviously got Bahrain across the causeway as well. And again, it's not so much for business. It's more for family. It's more for leisure. It's more for cultural. And again, you've got that waterfront experience, which you don't necessarily have in Riyadh.
Yeah. Okay, so I know I can follow that logic as well. I am following you, I promise. So As a property consultancy, you guys, Cavendish Maxwell, you're right, you're in the thick of things in these kind of mega hospitality developments. So with so many of these mega or giga projects still under construction, how do you advise developers to differentiate their offerings so they don't end up competing in a saturated market a few years down the line? How do those conversations go?
It depends. I mean, some developers, they have a mindset. You know, they've decided, sometimes it can be like dealing with your wife, you know, you just kind of have to go along with it.
Know who's boss.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
You know, they have a mindset in terms of what they want to do and what they want to achieve. Our role is to make sure that we guide them to come to the right decision. So through our strategy and consulting team, that's where we'd get involved at an early stage. So we'd look at the demand drivers for that area, we'd look at what's happening, we'd look at, you know, short-term, mid-term, long-term projections, and then we'd advise them from that perspective whether they should be putting a 4-star, a 5-star, number of keys, etc., location. Right. And the thing is, locations are limited as well. You know, particularly in the built-up areas like Riyadh. You know, there's a lot of the land is owned locally. They like to develop it locally, and that comes with a cost bracket as well. So sometimes when you start putting the deal together, you find that the cost of the land just makes the deal, it just doesn't work. So, yeah, we get to a point where we agree commercially, we agree from a program perspective, and we provide them, obviously, with a solution. Whether they take that and decide to move ahead is entirely up to them. But it's just making sure they've got the best information that's available at the time to make the most informed decision.
Are we seeing a move towards more experiential hospitality? You know, things like remote luxury or ecotourism. Because this is my impression. I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn. Or is the more kind of traditional business travel hotel still the main focus at the present time?
It's a very good question. I would say remote tourism is becoming more popular. I wouldn't necessarily say it's ecotourism. Okay. So if you move across to the AlUlas, some of the experience where they're using the natural caves and natural rock formations.
I mean, that's what's in my head, yeah.
And, you know, there's more activity going on in the mountainous regions such as Trojena. You know, and that offers an escape from the city, an escape from the heat, cooler environs, and often snow in the winter, which, I mean, who would expect to experience snow in Saudi Arabia?
No, I mean that's an incredibly attractive proposition, I think, for a lot of people, particularly, you know, regionally. But it's the who would have thought that? Yeah, really ambitious targets set for 2030 in the kingdom and beyond. But if you had to identify maybe the biggest bottleneck to maintaining the growth, the trajectory of growth that we're seeing. Is it finding experienced, you know, really skilled hospitality staff, or are there supply chain issues within the construction of these new assets?
I think looking at the bigger picture, it's going to be structural issues. You know, I think we've mentioned, you know, can everything that outlies to support hospitality and tourism, can it keep pace with the pace of development and the aspiration to reach this figure by 2030? The gigas, to an extent, have slowed down.
Sure.
You know, whereas before we were seeing issues with material shortages, labour shortages, and, you know, people, senior management consultants that could actually go in and do the work, that is no longer becoming a problem. There's more availability in that market. I think the biggest issue is from the hotel operators, maybe actually getting people that want to relocate to Saudi to operate these facilities. But I mean, that's a problem for 2 or 3 years down the line.
It's a problem for down the road, isn't it?
Yeah.
The World Cup on at the moment, of course, so we need to talk about it being in Saudi in 2034. But there's also Expo 2030 as well to think about, isn't there? So how transformative could those two events be?
Highly transformative, if we're being, in terms of demand, but more importantly in terms of market perception. Yeah. You know, can Saudi do it? There was a lot of questions around whether the UAE could make a successful Expo, and they did. It was fantastic. You know, when it happened, it was brilliant. Again, Qatar World Cup. You know, there's a lot of questions around whether that would work and whether that would be successful given the change in timings of when it was held. You know, you've almost got a double whammy in 4 years in terms of what's going on in KSA. So, you know, when this goes ahead, and it will go ahead, and it will be successful, it's going to have a huge structural impact across the whole of KSA and certainly the region. Aspirationally, KSA wants to be the global hub of tourism. Can it achieve that? It's certainly there in terms of the regional hub. When you start looking at the numbers and you look at the volume of international travel and you look at the volume of domestic travel and the spend per head. So again, then you've got to look at, I keep saying look around the hospitality sector. So, it will encourage longer term investment, investor sentiment in hotels, and then that will move to service departments. People think, well, actually service departments might be an option over hotels. You can still own and operate as a going concern. And again, you've got the infrastructure that we've mentioned about as well. And then the wider picture is, where do you house all these people that are coming in to work in the hotels, that are working in the retail, that are working in the F&B that's actually required to support this growth? So it's certainly an interesting conundrum, and probably not one I can answer fully today.
No, I don't expect you to. Your opinion's the key. So if you're an investor and you're looking at the Saudi tourism story today, is there a metric or maybe a trend? We always ask about trends and metrics on this show, but is there something that maybe matters more than that headline spending figure?
At the moment, I don't think we've got enough data to kind of put a finger on that metric. Maybe come back on in 6 months and we'll have another conversation about this. Certainly the key drivers for hospitality at the moment are, as we said, religious tourism and business travel. That will continue. And it will continue to expand and grow. We've talked about the luxury experiences. Will there become a saturation point for that? We don't know until everything that's happening on the Red Sea opens up and, that starts to settle over a 12, 18-month period.
Okay. Well, you've invited yourself back, so 6 months. I'll hold you to that, Kevin, as well.
That was inadvertent, Tim.
Get that in the diary now. Final question for you. And again, it's kind of asking you to ruminate, or it's not quite crystal ball, but if I was to ask you for an outlook for the hospitality market in Saudi Arabia over the next 12 months, if that was the question, how would you answer it?
Extremely positive, but increasingly nuanced. Religious tourism will continue to underpin performance in Makkah and Medina. You've then got, you've got further expansions into different areas in Medina. People are going to want these more experiences. Instead of just coming for a religious pilgrimage, they're going to extend that stay. They're going to look at things that they want to go and see and do, particularly around that Red Sea area. Riyadh will still benefit from business travel. You've got the events, you've got the ongoing investment. Obviously, you've got the big driver of PIF sat behind the scenes that is obviously funding all this. And domestic tourism will continue to be a key stabiliser, particularly during this period.
Much covers it, I think. It's a new report out from Cavendish Maxwell, the property consultancy. Kevin Duffield is Regional Director for Built Asset Consulting with them. It's good to talk to you. Good to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on, Tim. Pleasure.
Appreciate it.